The screen said Evan, the photo I took of him on the river dock 15 years ago, flickering like an old porch light. I answered before the second ring. Mom, I don't have much time. Where am I? I am Dad, but our family plan used to list me as Mom because of a paperwork joke Evan thought was hilarious when he was 16. The joke outlived him. Who is this? I said. My voice sounded like gravel under a boot. My hands were steady. The bucket water trembled a little. I thumbed a screenshot of the call and stared until the screen timed out and showed my face, older than I ever agreed to be. 15 years in the same dock photo. 15 years and my ribs learned to sit quiet. The phone buzzed again. Second call, same name, same photo, same hour. I didn't pick up. I stood in the hollow glow of the hallway and listened to my heartbeat like a slow wrench tapping steel. If a prank wanted a reaction, it wasn't going to get mine. Not on the phone. I shut down the buffer, locked up, and walked out to the drizzle. My apartment sat across from the high school in an old brick walk-up with radiators that clanged like lost swords in winter. Rent control saved my life more than once. I looked up at the window and pictured my own keys, resting in a chipped cereal bowl near the door. It was funny what people wanted from you when they decided you were done wanting things for yourself. The rain was the kind that didn't fall so much as hang there. A mist that coated your eyelashes and made the world look softer than it was. The asphalt reflected the sodium lights in blurred gold streaks. My shoes left prints that vanished behind me, swallowed by the wet. The phone felt heavier in my pocket than it had any right to. By the time I reached the stoop, the air smelled of iron and damp brick. I fished out my keys, but my hand hesitated. The screen had lit again. Missed call. Evan. I stared until the glow dimmed. The image, Evan on the dock, squinting against the sun, the wooden slats beneath his bare feet, was burned into my eyes. He'd been 17 then, the summer before he left for college, the summer before the accident. Inside, the apartment was quiet except for the radiator sighing. I set my phone on the counter, face down. The walls were lined with yellowed photos, frames mismatched, from thrift stores. I kept his room mostly the same, though I told myself it was only because I never needed the space. His track medals still hung from the bedpost, a few rusted with time. The smell of dust and old laundry never quite left. I took off my jacket, sat in the kitchen, and waited for the adrenaline to ebb. The digital clock over the stove blinked 3:28. I poured a glass of water and stared at the reflection in it. Warped, dim, unrecognizable. The mind can be a cruel curator. It pulls the same image from storage again and again, sharpens it until you can't tell memory from invention. I remembered Evan's voice too clearly, the low drawl when he was tired, the rasp when he'd been laughing, the way he used to call me old man even when I was only 42. That voice on the phone had sounded wrong. Softer, fragile, like the echo of something spoken in another room. I didn't sleep. I watched the rain taper off to nothing and the streetlights click out one by one. When dawn bled through the blinds, I checked my phone. One new voicemail. I pressed play. A hiss. Then a faint whisper, barely above the static. Dad, please. Then silence. The timestamp matched the second call. My stomach clenched. I replayed it 3 times, each time hoping to hear something new, another word, a clue. But all that came through was the plea and the emptiness that followed. By 7, I'd convinced myself it was some scam, a deepfake or hacked line. There were programs that could mimic a voice now. Maybe someone had pulled audio from old videos. Maybe grief was just easier to exploit these days. I'd seen enough news to know the world didn't run out of cruelty. Still, I couldn't stop thinking about the phrasing. Where am I? Not, how are you? Not, I miss you. Where? As if he'd woken up somewhere unfamiliar. I called the number back. It rang twice, then went to the automated message. The number you have dialed is not in service. Not disconnected, not in service. Like it existed somewhere but not here. I spent the day pretending to work. The janitor's closet smelled of lemon cleaner and rust. Every locker door echoed like a cough. The kids moved through the halls in waves, their laughter and shouting rolling off me like static. I caught glimpses of boys who looked like Evan from behind, same shoulders, same messy hair, and every time I blinked, they dissolved into strangers. When the bell rang for the last time, I stayed late, like always. The principal had stopped asking why years ago. I said I preferred the quiet, but that wasn't true. The quiet was a mirror, and sometimes it showed me too much. At 3:07 a.m., the next night, the phone rang again. Same photo, same name. I didn't answer this time either. I let it ring until the sound felt like pressure behind my eyes. Then, when it stopped, I listened to the silence it left behind. A minute later, another notification. Voicemail. Dad, it's cold. I could hear something behind the words. A wind, or water, or maybe both. A distant metallic rhythm, like a chain striking a pole. I went to his room without turning on the light. The air was still, stale with memory. I sat on his bed, the springs complaining under my weight. My hands were shaking now. I tried to tell myself it was exhaustion. But deep down, I knew exhaustion didn't make you feel watched. I replayed the message. Once, twice. Then I opened the photo app, found the picture, the original from the doc. He'd been wearing a white t-shirt and jeans rolled up to the calves, holding a fishing rod. Behind him, the water glimmered with the late afternoon sun. The edges of the frame had caught the ripples in a way that made the reflection look like fire. He'd drowned 3 months later. They said he slipped off a bridge, late at night. Nobody saw it happen. They found his car parked by the railing, his shoes in the back seat. The water had taken 3 days to give him back. After the funeral, I sold the boat. Couldn't stand the sound of the motor. Couldn't stand the smell of the river. I kept that one photo, though. For a long time I thought it was punishment enough, but now the punishment had found its own voice. The next morning, I went to the phone store. The clerk was young, probably half Evan's age, and cheerful in that way people are when they don't know what ghosts sound like. I told him someone was spoofing an old contact, maybe using a clone number. He ran a diagnostic, frowned, then said, "Sir, there's no record of any incoming calls at those times." "No record?" "Nothing. Are you sure the phone rang?" I showed him the screenshots. He leaned closer, squinted, then looked at me the way people do when they're deciding how fragile you are. "Could be a glitch," he said. "Phones sometimes display cached data. Old contacts, stuff from the cloud. Happens after updates." "I don't do updates," I said. He nodded, typed something, and handed the phone back. "Maybe back up your data, just in case." On the walk home, the world looked too sharp. The cracks in the pavement, the graffiti bleeding down the brick walls, the torn posters, layered like old bark. Every sound, the hiss of traffic, the clatter of cans in an alley, felt amplified. The air itself seemed to vibrate. When I reached my building, the superintendent was sitting on the steps, smoking. He nodded at me. "You look like you saw a ghost," he said, and laughed at his own joke. I didn't answer. Inside, I placed the phone on the kitchen table face up. I stared at it until sunset. No calls came. At midnight, I made coffee. By 2, my eyelids felt sanded down, but I stayed awake. The clock ticked louder than usual, like it was waiting too. At 3:07, the screen lit again. Evan. This time I answered. "Dad?" The voice was clearer now, older maybe, or tired in a way that sounded like years. "I'm here," I said. A pause. Then, "It's dark. I can't see the water anymore." "Evan, where are you?" "Home, I think, but the lights went out." His breathing came in short bursts, as though he were cold. I wanted to say 1,000 things. How sorry I was, how much I missed him. but the words jammed in my throat. "Can you see anything?" I asked. A long silence. Then a sound, soft, rhythmic, like dripping. "Something's moving," he whispered. "It knows my name." I sat there for a long time, staring at the phone, waiting for it to ring again. When it didn't, I played the call from memory, every syllable etched into me. I realized my hand was bleeding. I'd clenched the edge of the table so hard that a splinter had buried itself in my palm. I cleaned the wound, wrapped it, and went to the window. Across the street, the school loomed dark. The janitor's closet light was still on. I couldn't remember if I'd turned it off. The next day I called in sick. I walked to the bridge. The same one. The railing had been repainted, the rust sealed under new metal. Someone had tied a bouquet there once. Now only the wire remained. I leaned over and stared into the river. The surface shimmered with morning glare, but deeper down it looked still, almost solid. I took out the phone and scrolled through the logs again. 3 calls, 2 voicemails, no data trace, no outgoing records. I opened the camera, turned it toward the water. The reflection looked wrong. Too deep, too dark. For a moment, I thought I saw movement, something pale drifting beneath the surface. Then a truck passed and the wake erased it. When I got home, I found a new message waiting. Not a voicemail, an image. The same photo from the dock, but different. The light was colder, the sky overcast, and Evan wasn't smiling. That night I dreamed of the river. I stood on the dock, holding my phone. The screen glowed, and from the water came a voice. Muffled, stretched thin. "Dad, answer." I woke with my hand reaching toward the dark. The days blurred after that. I stopped answering calls from anyone, stopped going to work. The phone stayed on the table, and I watched it the way a soldier watches a door in enemy territory. Every night at 3:07 it rang. Every night I answered. Sometimes he said nothing, only breathed. Sometimes he asked questions that made no sense. "Did you see the keys?" Or, "Who's sleeping in my bed?" Once, I thought I heard another voice behind him, low and distant, repeating his words like an echo that had learned to speak. I tried recording the calls, but every playback came out blank. I called the number again and again, but it never connected. One night, I asked him, "Evan, what do you see when you look around?" He said, "Water, walls, a light that keeps going out." Then softer, "Dad, I think you're the one who's gone." The line hissed. The air in the apartment thickened, pressing against my skin. The lights flickered. When they steadied again, the phone was silent. That was 3 nights ago. I haven't slept since. Now, as I write this, the clock on the stove blinks 3:06. The radiator is quiet. The rain has started again, soft against the glass. The phone lies on the table. It begins to glow. "Evan." I pick it up. "Dad," he says, "come home." And I realize, finally, that maybe he hasn't been calling from where he is. Maybe he's calling from where I'm going. My name is Nathan Holbrook, but everybody says Nate. It sounds easier, less formal, something you can call down a hallway or across a job site without breaking stride. I welded frames for 25 years, the kind of work that leaves a smell on your hands no soap can lift. The plant was a world made of sparks, steel, and men who spoke in shorthand. We measured life by shifts, pay cycles, the hiss of gas, and the groan of cooling metal. When the plant shuttered, it didn't happen all at once. First came rumors, then slow weeks, then an announcement wrapped in language like restructuring and market conditions. What they meant was we were obsolete. Machines could hold steadier, faster, cheaper. Progress doesn't ask permission. After that, I cleaned the corridors the kids cut through to better lives. It was night work mostly, mops and wax and fluorescent hums, pushing carts past bulletin boards filled with smiles of people who would never know what a welding burn smelled like. I didn't mind the quiet. You learn a lot from silence if you give it a chance to talk. I have a bad knee, a good back, and a head full of precise measurements: 1/4 inch, 5/8, tolerance plus or -2. Grief taught me patience. Work taught me leverage. Between the two, you learn how to stay upright when the ground tilts. A lot of things do not scare me. Heights, fire, debt. I've had conversations with all of them. But phones do, a little. Phones are how goodbyes get lazy. People think they're saving time, but what they're really saving is distance. A text instead of a talk, a call instead of a visit, a voicemail instead of a voice. It's the tool of the modern coward and the lonely man alike. I keep mine charged out of habit, not affection. Evan died in a truck collision on County 9, late fall, blind curve, rain slick. That's the official language, cold words stamped on a report, folded into an envelope, handed over with practiced sympathy. People made up their own versions, because people can't stand a vacuum. They said too fast, brakes, a party before, a girl, a fight. None of it was ever proved. None of it ever mattered to the hole he left behind. I kept the receipt for a set of front brake calipers he ordered 2 days before the crash. He never installed them. I never forgave the calendar for how it moves while you stand still. The dates keep coming, like waves against a rock that doesn't know it's being worn away. Some nights I hear that rain again, the one from the report. I imagine the curve, the glare of headlights on wet asphalt, the flash of reflected signs that warn but never prevent. I see the truck, the way it must have spun, how the cab folded in like a sigh. I think about the parts, the ones I could name by number, and how each one behaved exactly as designed, until the driver didn't. Machines obey physics. Humans don't always. That's the gap between life and aftermath. I showered, dressed, brewed coffee that tasted like reheated pennies, and watched the blue light take Kenmore Bend by the shoulders. The town has a river that smells faintly of rust and algae, a new tech campus pretending it is rainproof progress, and a fairground that looks like a war memorial once the rides are gone. The drizzle felt seasonal and personal, like the sky knew our history and didn't want to let it go. The river runs slow through here, patient as an old man at a diner, and sometimes it carries branches that look like wreckage. At 9 a.m., I was supposed to have brunch with my son Caleb and his fiancée, Lena. Caleb's the kind of man who learned early how to survive change by nodding at it. He works in logistics, which means he moves things without touching them. He talks about efficiency, throughput, and optimization. He wears a watch that counts his steps and tells him when to breathe. I used to build things you could lean against. He builds things you can't see. I don't hold it against him. The world turned digital while I was still tightening bolts. Somebody had to keep up. Lena is nerves and lip gloss walking in a human body. She films everything, every meal, every smile, every sunset, as if proof is the only way to believe life happened. They met at a realtor mixer where nobody ate, which sounds about right. She's bright, ambitious, the kind of person who calls hard work a grind and means it as a compliment. I think she likes me, in the polite, detached way people like background characters in their own story. The wedding was tomorrow at the old Union Hall, the one they refurbished into a heritage venue. I had the seat by the pillar with the chipped plaster, right where the draft always finds its way in. I'd ironed my shirt the night before, though nobody asked me to. I even polished my boots. I wanted to look like someone who still showed up. I'd rehearsed what to say if Evan's name came up. It doesn't, usually, but weddings have a way of unearthing ghosts. You see someone's face in the corner of a dance floor that isn't there. You hear a laugh that matches one you buried. People toast to love and forever, and all you can think about is how fragile forever sounds when you've watched it collapse in real time. My phone pinged just as I was rinsing out the mug. A message from an old contact I hadn't used in 3 years. Jessa, private investigator by license, municipal clerk by temperament. She was the kind of woman who filed things alphabetically, even when they were feelings. "Still around, Nate," the message read. That was all. No greeting, no context, just that question hanging in digital air. I stared at it for a long minute. "Still around" sounded less like curiosity and more like a challenge. I scrolled through our old thread. The last message was from me. "Thanks for checking." That was after she helped me find out what I already knew. Evan's case wasn't going anywhere. There were no suspects, no deeper mystery, just a wet road and bad luck. But she'd been kind. She'd met me at a diner off Route 7, ordered tea, took notes in a small leather book, and asked questions like she wanted to fix something broken but knew better. Afterward, she mailed me the official file copies she wasn't supposed to have. That was her version of mercy. I sent the screenshot of the 307 call. A missed call from an unknown number that came 3 nights ago, same time Evan used to clock out when he worked weekends with me. I don't believe in signs, but I do notice patterns. The call had no voicemail, no number traceable through the usual apps. Just a timestamp. I'd thought about deleting it, but instead I'd taken a screenshot and named it Maybe. "Got time for coffee?" she wrote back, "and bring whatever you've never thrown away." I stared at those words like they were coordinates. Whatever I'd never thrown away could fill a small museum. Evan's old work gloves, one still stiff with oil, a receipt for brake calipers, the last note he'd written on the fridge. "Back late, don't wait up." The handwriting that always slanted downhill. I kept them all in a cigar box that once belonged to my father, another man who left through a door no one expected. Maybe what Jessa wanted was in that box. Maybe she just wanted to see if I'd opened it. The coffee shop she meant would be the one on River Street, the only place in town that still uses ceramic mugs. I imagined the smell of roasted beans, the hiss of the steamer, the sound of umbrellas shaking off weather. I hadn't been there in months. Too many conversations start with, "How have you been?" and end with, "Take care." 2 lies told in opposite directions. I sat at the table by the window and watched the drizzle harden into rain. The streetlights flickered like tired eyes. Kenmore Bend had changed since the plant closed. Boutiques in old garages, murals over boarded windows, a yoga studio where the union office used to be. Progress again. Always progress. But at night you can still hear the hum of what used to be if you listen between the traffic lights. The ghosts here wear uniforms and carry lunch pails. I took the cigar box from the drawer and opened it. Inside, Evan's photo at the lake, grinning in a sweatshirt too big for him. The brake receipt, folded into a square. A keychain shaped like a wrench. A scrap of paper with numbers that might have been a part order. And a badge from the plant's final year. His nameplate faded to grey. I held each thing for a second, as if weight could translate into meaning. It didn't. It never does. I drove to River Street with the radio off. The town looked like it was holding its breath. The tech campus glowed at the edge of everything, all glass and optimism, while the old fairground sagged into mud and memory. I passed the spot where Evan used to park his truck, the one they towed away after the crash. The asphalt still had a darker patch, like a scar that forgot to fade. When I walked into the cafe, the bell over the door made a tired sound. Jessa was already there, same leather notebook, same calm posture. She wore a grey coat and the look of someone who knows too much about human nature to be surprised by it anymore. She smiled when she saw me, not out of joy but recognition. "You look the same," she said. "So do you," I lied. We sat, ordered, and didn't talk for a full minute. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was familiar, the kind you share with someone who's been in the same kind of pain long enough to respect its borders. Finally, she said, "You sent me that screenshot. The 307 call. You think it means something?" "I don't know what I think," I said. "But it's the only thing that's felt wrong in a while." She nodded slowly. Sometimes wrong is where answers start. Outside, the rain tapped against the window, like a clock that had forgotten its rhythm. Inside, the air smelled of burnt sugar and patience. I slid the cigar box across the table. She rested her hand on it, fingers tracing the grain of the wood. "Still holding on," she murmured. "Maybe holding up," I said. "Same thing some days." And for the first time in years, I felt the faint shift of something like movement, pain turning its face toward purpose, however small. I didn't know if the call meant anything. I didn't know if the past was coming back, or if it had never really left. But I knew this. Grief isn't a straight line. It's a circle with bad geometry. And sometimes, the only way out is through someone else's question. "Tell me everything," she said. So I did. And the rain kept time for us. Brunch and a camera. The brunch joint had repurposed factory lights and menus, written like job applications. Caleb hugged me and did not look at me long. Lena filmed a plate of fruit like it had to pass inspection. Her brother Rudy sat at a corner table spinning a fob in his fingers and grinning without showing teeth. "Dad," Caleb said, "some guests are asking if you'll say a few words tomorrow. Keep it short. Nostalgic, but not sad." "I can do short," I said. "I did short for 15 years. Lena leaned over the table with a smile that was all enamel. "Speaking of short, your apartment is so close to school. We worry about you alone there. The stairs, the radiator. Caleb thinks a conservatorship would help with paperwork and safety, just a standard thing, and we could hold the keys for you. Presentation matters. At the reception would be a moment." "You want my keys in front of 100 people," I said. "Optics," she said. "It would show trust." "Trust looks a lot like a hand in my pocket," I said. Rudy filmed B-roll of my hands around the coffee. "Authenticity," he said. I drained the cup and stood up. "I have a night shift," I said, "and a morning I need to survive. See you kids tomorrow. Don't rehearse anything you wouldn't show to Jesus." In the parking lot, the drizzle got promoted to rain. I sent Jessa a text back. "Coffee in an hour." Jessa's office sat behind a salon where my neighbor Dee cut hair and collected stories like lint on a sweater. Every inch of the place smelled faintly of chemicals and peppermint spray, the kind that promises renewal in a bottle. Dee ran her salon like a confessional booth, her scissors clicking like punctuation marks between gossip and grace. I used to sit in her chair once a month, not for the trim but for the company. She always said the right thing without thinking about it too long. "You can tell a man by how he tips and how he listens," she told me once. I never asked which part she thought I was good at. To get to Jessa's office, you had to walk past the salon's line of mirrors, faces of women, men, a few kids waiting their turn under fluorescent mercy, and then through a narrow door with a sign that said, "Municipal Record Storage, Authorized Entry Only." Jessa liked to hide behind official labels. The office had a cheap kettle that never quite boiled water, but tried its best, a better scanner that hummed like a wasp, and a stack of municipal forms that looked like thick snowdrifts of bureaucracy. You could tell the place belonged to someone who lived halfway between the world of rules and the world of exceptions. She was leaning over her desk when I came in, sleeves rolled up, hair tied in a knot that looked more functional than stylish. The blinds were half closed, slicing the room into strips of grey light. A corkboard behind her held clipped articles, missing persons, traffic accidents, grant announcements, the occasional lost pet flyer. She said it helped her see patterns. To me, it looked like a city's conscience pinned to a wall. "You brought the cigar box," she said, her eyes flicking to the thing in my hand before I'd even set it down. She didn't sound surprised, more like she'd been waiting for it. I placed the box on her desk. The old wood looked out of place against the laminate surface. Inside were the fragments of 15 years of unfinished business, receipts, photos, the caliper invoice, the towing company note yellowed at the edges, and the folded ledger page I had taken once from the man who drove the truck that hit Evan. His name was Tommy Graft. I had not looked at that page in years. It was creased into memory shape. The paper listed dates and one-word confessions: owed, sold, fixed, lied. One of the dates matched the week of the accident. I used to wonder if lied meant something bigger than he wanted to say. Jessa didn't blink. Her face was the kind that moved slowly, like it was waiting to confirm permission before reacting. Recycled numbers and spoofing apps exist, she said, voice steady. But the timing stinks. You sure you want to pull on this? I'm not violent, I said. I'm persuasive with hardware, and I know a fake when it talks like a real thing. She studied me for a moment, eyes moving like a welder's torch across my face, careful, assessing, precise. Then she opened the cigar box and began laying things out in a neat grid. The receipts in one pile, the photo in another, the ledger unfolded last like a map. She ran a finger down the columns. You kept all this, she murmured. Most people get rid of the evidence to save themselves. Most people aren't me. No, she said quietly. You're still keeping score. I didn't answer. The scanner whined to life, and she started feeding in the papers one by one. I'll check records on that number, she said. See who had it when it was reassigned. If it's a spoof, it'll smell like cheap cologne. We can look for the cologne. You think it's random? I think nothing's random, she said, but everything has a reason, even ghosts. I looked around her office while she worked. On a shelf sat a collection of ceramic owls, each one different, tiny tokens from cases closed or still open. Beside them, a cracked mug read, "Trust no one but verify." She'd once told me her father was a sheriff who didn't believe in intuition, only paperwork. She'd inherited both traits, the suspicion and the method. Tomorrow is the wedding, I said, breaking the hum of the scanner. They want my keys on camera. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. Your keys? Part of the video montage. Lena said it symbolizes generational strength. Me passing something down. I think she just likes how metal catches light. Jessa poured us both more coffee. It came out of the same kettle that could never quite boil, always producing a drink 1 degree shy of comfort. Then we control the camera, she said. I didn't ask what she meant, but the phrase settled in my chest like a warning dressed as advice. Outside, the drizzle had turned to a fine mist. Through the frosted glass, I could hear Dee's laugh from the salon next door, sharp and bright. She was talking to someone, probably one of her regulars, and the cadence of her voice sounded like gossip with a pulse. When I stepped back through the connecting door, the smell of hairspray and talk hit me all at once. Dee was trimming a man's hair, the radio humming something nostalgic. She caught my reflection in the mirror and waved me over, scissors still moving. You hear the little preacher is officiating, she said. Pastor Rick, he loves a microphone. Been in my chair twice this week and not for hair. Who else? I said, leaning against the counter. Your future daughter-in-law, she said, smirking. They practice speeches like it's theatre, optics. You watch your back, Nate. There's more performance in weddings now than Broadway. Lena's good at appearances, I said. That's her trade. She's good at control, Dee said, lowering her voice. Knows where every camera's pointing. Knows which side of her face forgives better. I didn't respond. The radio crackled with static, the kind that sounds like rain on a roof. Outside, the street shimmered from the drizzle, neon reflections stretching down the puddled asphalt. Dee turned back to her customer, snipping rhythmically. You still thinking about Evan? She asked suddenly, eyes meeting mine in the mirror. Every day, I said. Then don't let this thing make you forget him again, she said. You start chasing ghosts, they'll run you dry. I nodded, but inside, something had already started to shift, the way an engine hums before it knows it's being tested. Jessa's question lingered. You sure you want to pull on this? I didn't have an answer. I only had the call, the voice that said Mom, and the smell of rain that had followed me from one room to another for 15 years. I drove home past the fairgrounds. The Ferris wheel was rusted, half dismantled, but one car still swayed when the wind caught it right. When Evan was little, we'd go every summer, just the two of us. He used to wave at people from the top, shouting like the air itself could carry his joy farther. That memory felt like another man's life now. Back at the house, I poured myself a drink and sat by the window. The phone lay on the table, black screen reflecting the lamp. I opened the call log again, 307, unknown. I pressed redial, even though I knew it was useless. The same hollow ring, then a mechanical voice. The number you have dialed is not in service. I let it play twice before hanging up. The night stretched thin. Outside, the rain picked up again, slanting sideways against the glass. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked at nothing. I thought about Tommy Graft, the man whose truck hit my son, the man whose ledger I had stolen from his glove box, while he sat half-drunk in the wrecking yard office months later. I'd told myself I wanted understanding. Truth is, I wanted leverage. But what does leverage matter when the other man's already ruined? Graft had gone to seed after the accident, divorced, fired, eventually moved 3 towns over to work at a scrapyard. I heard once he'd stopped driving altogether, said it made him sick to see headlights curve into darkness. I unfolded the ledger again. The page trembled slightly in my hand. The ink had bled in places, water damage maybe, or tears if I were the kind of man to believe in those. Lied, I whispered to the word. It looked heavier now than it had 15 years ago. There was a number scrawled beside it, something that could have been an address or coordinates. I took a photo with my phone, sent it to Jessa without a caption. She replied with a single word, tomorrow. When I finally slept, it was shallow. Dreams came fragmented, Evan's laugh echoing through static, headlights bending around a curve, the word mom whispered through rain. I woke before dawn, heart steady but cold, the kind of calm that doesn't feel like peace. At 8, I ironed the same shirt I'd worn to his funeral. It wasn't superstition, just familiarity. By 9, I was back at the Union Hall for the wedding setup. The place smelled like sawdust and paint, as if trying to hide its own age. Lena stood near the stage, headset on, directing people like a general with good lighting. Caleb saw me and smiled. Tired, grateful, a little nervous. You made it, he said. Wouldn't miss it, I said, though that wasn't entirely true. Pastor Rick hovered near the podium, voice booming even in rehearsal. Love is patient, love is kind, he said, testing the microphone. And love looks best from the left angle. Lena nodded approvingly. I caught Jessa's silhouette by the back door, her coat darker than the rest. She raised a cup slightly. Coffee, always coffee, and mouthed, after. I nodded. The music swelled and someone shouted for the videographer to adjust exposure. I slipped my keys into my pocket and thought about what Jessa had said. We control the camera. Maybe this time, for once, I'd decide what got recorded. The day stretched ahead, full of rehearsed happiness, and the ghosts standing just out of frame. And somewhere behind it all, waiting like static on the line, was 307. Still ringing, still unanswered. The Union Hall smelled like varnish and beer and second chances. The lights were warm to hide the cold. Pastor Rick did the jokes about love as a journey and family as a team. People cried because cameras were out. I sat 3 rows back, with a decent view of the aisle and the exit. My pockets carried 2 things, my old flip-out box cutter and the flimsy courage that comes from deciding to stop being polite. The ceremony ended. Confetti died on the floor. The band tried a song from 10 years ago and missed. I leaned on my knee and waited for the plate to circle for me. It did. Ladies and gentlemen, Lena said, mic in hand, tears shining like a sale price. We wanted to do something meaningful. Family is safety. Caleb's father has been living alone in an old apartment with stairs that scare me. I stood. The hall turned like I had shot a flare. Dad, Caleb said, walking toward me, smiling too hard. We want to help. We can hold your keys, just for emergencies. We want people to see we're here for you." "No," I said. The word was small and metal. It landed and stayed. Lena stepped forward and held out her bouquet like a collection plate. "Please, Nate, for the camera." "No," I said again. She slapped me. Not hard enough to do damage, hard enough to do television. I did not move. I dialed a number I had not used in 15 years. Before the second ring, the doors at the back opened, and a man walked in with rain on his shoulders and an old pain on his face. Tommy Graft. The whole hall seemed to breathe in. Then it cried, the kind of cry people do when the past walks in with a face you all tried to forget. We found a side room with a table that had cut marks from 1,000 meetings, the kind of table that remembered every argument, every plea, every decision made too late. The wood was scarred in the center, where pens had pressed too hard, initials carved by bored custodians or restless men waiting on verdicts. The air carried the weight of dust and afterthoughts, the faint smell of coffee that had gone cold sometime last year. Light came from a single overhead bulb that flickered just enough to remind us of time passing. Jessa came through another door, with her phone out and eyes dry. She had that look of focus that turns a person into an instrument. No wasted movement, no excess emotion, just calibration. Her hair was pinned back tighter than usual, and her coat was folded over her arm like she might leave any second if the truth turned ugly. Behind her, the corridor hummed with the low murmur of wedding guests settling in the main hall. I could hear distant music, something cheerful that didn't belong anywhere near this room. Tommy sat down slowly, as if gravity had tripled for him alone. His face had collapsed inward since I'd last seen him, the skin drawn over bone, like the idea of a man who had used up his years too quickly. He spread a ledger on the table, the same ledger I had once held, the one that had lived under my mattress for a decade before I gave it back to the dark. But now there were more pages. He had added to it scraps of lined paper, torn receipts, envelopes folded in as though confession required variety. The ink changed color halfway through, black to blue to red, like even the pens had run out of patience. He kept dates like holy days and wrote down every worst thing that ever walked through his memory. "I tried to call you," he said. His voice was gravel ground down to powder. "I tried to write. I tore it up. Then the wedding invitation came through my sister, because this town is smaller than a closet. I thought maybe you would want to hear it with all the lights on." "Say it," I said. The words felt dry in my mouth. My palms pressed flat against the table, feeling every dent beneath the varnish. He took a long breath, the kind that sounded like he'd practiced it 100 times and still didn't believe it would come out right. "Back then," he said, voice low, "a woman connected to Lena's family gave me small checks through a catering company, not to lie, to stay quiet. It was during my worst drinking. The checks were for my volunteer time with a church pantry that I never saw. I bought liquor and silence. I said to myself, I owed your boy truth later. I ran out of later." The sentence sat there between us, heavy as a brick. Jessa's pen scratched across her notebook, neat and quick. She didn't look up when she spoke. "This is not a courtroom," she said. "No charges, no accusations we cannot prove, just patterns." Tommy nodded, slow and mechanical. "There was a rumor," he continued, "not a plan, not a crime. A rumor that your boy's car had brake work done at a cut-rate pop-up garage. And maybe somebody said the brakes were fine. And maybe somebody told somebody else that if anyone looked too hard, they'd find out Evan was careless and you were poor. I said nothing. I wanted nothing. Then I drank that nothing until it burned me clean. I am sober now. It doesn't give you anything back." His hands trembled as he spoke. He kept them on the table, palms open, as if offering proof that they held nothing more dangerous than regret. I could see the veins raised along his wrist, a map of years spent holding wrenches, steering wheels, and bottles. He looked smaller than the man I remembered. smaller than the memory itself. My hand stayed flat on the table. I looked at the door and the corridor beyond it, picturing the bouquet shaking in Lena's hand, the photographer adjusting his lens, Caleb's forced smile waiting for its cue. The hum of the reception bled faintly through the wall, a murmur of applause, laughter that didn't know what it was echoing against. The world outside this room kept moving forward while we sat in the pause between confession and consequence. Tommy slid his phone across the table. The screen was cracked in one corner, wrapped in a cheap rubber case that had seen better days. On it was a private link. The title read 307. The name twisted something inside me. I hesitated before touching it. The number had been haunting me for days. That timestamp burned into the inside of my skull. We listened. The recording began with a faint hiss, like an old cassette waking up. Then a voice, Evan's voice, young, uncertain, caught between fear and static. "Mom," it said, stretched thin, almost childlike. "I don't have much time. Where am I?" Then came a click, sharp and deliberate, followed by a seam of static that rolled like wind through metal. "Spliced," Jessa said immediately. Her ear for these things was clinical. "That click is somebody's sloppy edit. It's where two pieces meet that shouldn't." The sound still hung in the air after she stopped speaking. I wanted to hear it again, but I couldn't bring myself to press play. It was too close to something sacred, or maybe too close to something cruel. Tommy swallowed hard, his Adam's apple rising like a knot. "Rudy sent it to me by mistake," he said. "A share request. I think he meant to text Lena. He uses apps for fun. He plays with ghosts." "Rudy?" I asked. The name came out sharper than I intended. "As in her brother?" Tommy nodded. "The one who does the sound design for those true crime podcasts. He was helping with the wedding video, said he wanted it to feel cinematic." His mouth twisted at the word. "He's got all these programs. He can make voices say anything. He used to brag about how he could fake a sermon or splice an old voicemail into something new. When I got the file, I thought it was a prank, but then I saw the name. Your boy's number, the timestamp. I figured maybe I wasn't supposed to see it." Jessa leaned forward, elbows on the table. "You still have the message from Rudy?" Tommy shook his head. "Deleted it right after. Thought it was bad luck." "That's not luck," she said. "That's evidence." I could feel the room tighten around us, the air thinning with every word. My chest ached in that familiar way grief does when it finds new ground to stand on. "Why now?" I asked. "Why send this to you? Why at all?" He rubbed a hand over his face, the gesture of a man trying to erase himself. "Maybe because Lena wanted control of the story," he said. "Maybe Rudy was showing off. Maybe someone thought you'd hear it and keep quiet out of confusion. Or maybe it was just an accident. People make ghosts all the time now. They call them memorial projects, voice recreations, AI tributes. They feed a few old clips into a machine and let it talk back. But this one wasn't right. I listened to it over and over, and it sounded like him, but wrong. Like he was trapped between breaths. The words burrowed under my skin, but I never imagined hearing my own son that way. His voice turned into a parlor trick, an echo for sale. Jessa reached over and turned off the phone's screen. "We need to trace the metadata," she said. "Find where it was uploaded from, what account handled it. I can pull the registry logs from the cloud vendor if we get lucky, but we do this quietly. If Lena's family is involved, we don't want them locking things down." Tommy nodded weakly. "I'll give you whatever passwords I have, my email, my cloud. I don't care anymore." "Good," she said, "but you care enough to show up, so don't mistake that for nothing." He looked at her, then at me, eyes wet now, but not from drink. "I used to think accidents were just math gone wrong," he said. "Wrong speed, wrong turn, wrong night. But it's people, always people. Someone paid me to forget, and I let them. You can't forgive me, but maybe you can use me." The silence that followed was long and uneven. Outside, the laughter swelled again. someone clinking a glass, a voice announcing toasts. The world had no idea it was still carrying a corpse in its story. Jessa stood, her chair scraping lightly against the floor. "We'll start with Rudy," she said. "If he's editing voices for fun, he's leaving fingerprints. Digital ones, but still." I stayed seated, staring at the ledger, the handwriting blurred. "You ever think," I said slowly, "that the truth doesn't set you free? It just opens a new kind of cage?" Jessa gave a small, humorless smile. "Freedom's overrated. Clarity's better." Tommy closed the ledger, pressing both palms on the cover as if holding down a restless animal. "You don't have to see me again," he said softly. "But I'll testify if it comes to that. I owe your boy my voice, at least." I looked at him, the man who had carried my nightmare in his pocket for 15 years. "You had your chance," I said. "Now we'll see what you do with this one." He nodded, not in agreement but in resignation. Then he stood, his shadow stretching thin under the overhead light, and walked out the door that led toward the back stairwell. His footsteps faded into the hum of distant music. Jessa lingered a moment longer, her hand on the phone. "The click in that file," she said almost to herself. "It's not just a splice, it's layered. Someone wanted it to sound old, authentic. That takes time. This wasn't casual." "Then someone planned it." "Yes," she said, "and they picked 3:07 for a reason." The clock on the wall ticked once, then stuttered, the second hand caught between moments. Outside, a cheer rose from the hall. Caleb and Lena must have entered for the reception. I heard clapping, laughter, the kind of applause that hides the cracks in everything. I stood slowly, the room dimming as if the light itself had grown tired. The ledger remained on the table, its pages curling at the corners, secrets breathing through paper fibers. I thought of Evan's voice, that fragile call through static. "Mom, I don't have much time." "Where am I?" and felt the echo of it in my chest, like a bell that refused to stop ringing. Jessa opened the door. "Come on," she said quietly. "Let's find where the ghost came from." And for a moment, I wondered which of us she meant. The morning after, we went to the municipal clerk's office because fantasies don't hold in fluorescent light. Jessa asked for collision records with charm and exact citations. The clerk gave us a stack of logs, toe slips, and the same cold wording from 15 years ago. I put my finger on the line that listed the toe, the location, the time. I checked it against my own receipt. It matched to the minute. We looked at Evan's service history from the body shop I used to work at. There was a stereo install, signed by Caleb, when he borrowed Evan's car for a day. In the margin, handwriting I did not know said brakes adjusted. No stamp, no initials, just the tricky slant of a person who writes like they are running away. "Who did this adjustment?" Jessa asked the clerk. "Handwriting says nobody," I said. "We find that person the hard way," Jessa said. On our way out, my phone buzzed. A text from Caleb. "Dad, don't make this bigger. We have a power of attorney template that would protect you. Lena drafted it with Pastor Rick. We'll sign after the toast today." I showed the message to Jessa. "Safety," she said. "They want to wrap you in bubble wrap and take your door." "Doors are for people who can stand behind them," I said. That night, Rudy went behind a club to vape and brag to a girl with metallic nails. I waited by the dumpster. When he turned, I stepped in and pinned him with an arm and a knee, not hard enough to break, hard enough to teach. "Hey," he said, breath sharp. Dude. "Who taught you to slice audio?" I said. "It was a joke," he said. "Content, viral hook. We used old family videos. You won't be mad if you hear the whole thing." "You'll show me," I said. He nodded so fast I worried about his neck. I eased him to the ground, kept his phone in his line of sight, and let him unlock. He opened a folder with labels that read rehearsal, bouquet, and call mix. The app was basic and illegal only in the moral sense. He sniffed. "Spoofing, not stealing." The carrier recycles numbers. We just presented. It makes people watch. We needed Grandpa to look fragile. The story needed a push. I am not Grandpa to you, I said, and if you ever call me Mum again, I will teach you a bigger word like consequence. He started crying without tears, the kind of crying people do when cameras are not around. Who told Pastor Rick to rehearse the key grab? I said. Rudy blinked. Maya. She wrote a beat sheet. She said if you refused, Lena would drop a tear, Rick would step in, microphone about care and safety, then we'd cut to gifts. It would crush. Content, I said. I left him on the asphalt and walked to my truck. I recorded a voice memo for myself, in case memory tried to soften later. First lesson of an alley. Walls tell the truth, the sky lies. Jessa sweet-talked the venue manager with a story about lost cufflinks and got us 20 minutes in the little security room with its grainy screens. We watched the rehearsal from 2 nights before. Lena held the bouquet at her waist like a shield. Maya circled with a phone and a headset. Pastor Rick practiced smiling. Keys, Maya said, pointing at the air like it owed her money. Hold the bouquet so he has to put them in there. Eye contact. Everyone say "oh" like a cue when he lets go. If he resists, go safety and tears. If he refuses, Rick steps in, says community, says guardianship, says we love him. Then cut cake. Okay, Lena said. And if he acts weird? Then the story is he is unwell, Maya said. We have the 307 call. We have the texts. We have the POA. We'll do it kindly. Kindly. We left with copies. Jessa backed everything up twice, once in the cloud and once on a thumb drive she wore on a chain. By then the rain had decided to be permanent. On the walk to my apartment, Dee poked her head out and whispered something sharp. I saw Pastor Rick with your new daughter-in-law, she said. They hug like publicists. Be careful what you let them touch. Keys, I said. Keys, she said back, and shut her door like good advice. I drove to the old shop. The owner still kept my name on a pegboard, as if I might come back for an oil change and a pep talk. We found the parts room in the back. Dust sat on everything like a tourist. I opened a shelf and there it was, the small box with 2 front calipers, receipt dated 2 days before the crash, Evan's name. My son had been 19 and disorganized and full of promise. People will call that careless. I call it 19. I set the box on the counter and stared at it until the edges blurred. Then I took the receipt and put it in my wallet next to my driver's license. If anybody wanted to say, my boy ignored the brakes, they could read the date and then look me in the face and explain the calendar to me. I called my union buddy and asked about renting a tow truck for a day. Not to drive fast, to move things. He laughed and said I could still tie a diamond hitch with my eyes closed. I can tie one with my eyes angry, I said. Rudy met Lena's mother by the old warehouse at the riverfront, the one where pallets stack like a religion. I followed in the rented tow truck and parked quiet. Jessa sat beside me with her phone ready. They talked over a clipboard and an envelope that looked full of little bills. I stepped out. Rudy saw me and bolted. He was quick. I am not quick. I am heavy and stubborn, and I know levers. A pallet jack leaned against a fence. I grabbed it and shoved it under the rear axle of their idling SUV and pumped until the tires kissed air. Jessa handed me a tow strap, and I looped it through the wheel gap and around a post. The car rocked and settled like a tired horse. Lena's mother shouted words that felt expensive. No one is hurt, I said. The car is safe. We need your planner. She clutched it like a baby and then shoved it at me. I flipped through. The pages had meetings and memos, and a line for the wedding that read, key grab, plus announce safety conservatorship. It was not a crime. It was a plan. I set the planner on the SUV hood and took a picture. Then I put it back in her hands. People think you ruin them by taking things. You ruin them by showing them. We let the car down and left. I returned the pallet jack to where I found it. I like putting tools back. We met Pastor Rick in his office. He had awards on the wall for community engagement and a signature smile that looked as rehearsed as a weather forecast. Tommy stood behind me like a solid old tree. "Pastor," I said, "we watched your rehearsal. We heard the plan. If that was ministry, I must have misread the Bible." He held up both hands. "It was for his safety," he said, nodding toward me as if I were not present. "The optics may have been misjudged." "We are recording," Jessa said. The pastor folded. He confessed to rehearsing a heartfelt intervention at the reception, told to him by Maya with words about guardianship, protection, and optics. He admitted it would play well online and in the pews. No law broken, just people using care as a stage prop. When he finished, Tommy spoke. "You owe him an apology in the same room where you rehearsed the harm," he said. "Do right at volume." The pastor nodded and looked at the clock, like maybe Grace kept hours. At the technical college, a polite grad student named Lena listened to the 307 file through headphones and a spectrogram. She clicked and dragged and pointed to where the line jumped like a lie, trying to look casual. "Splice points," she said. "And background noise that does not match." The voice was built from more than one source, probably old family videos. The caller ID can be spoofed. The timestamp is real. The content is manufactured. If you want me to show that live, I can route it through a projector with markers. "How sure?" I said. "Sure enough to teach it," she said. "People fake truth with emotion. I fake emotion with math." Jessa hired her for 100 cash and a promise of a good letter. We booked the Union Hall for an hour after the reception for a private toast and a little show. Before the show, Caleb asked me to meet him behind the venue. 2 security contractors stood near him, soft armor under suit jackets, the kind of men who looked healthier than the choices that got them hired. "Dad," Caleb said, "sign the apartment. We will take care of everything. If this goes public, Lena's partnerships will tank, Maya's channel will suffer, and my business depends on reputation. We can give you a better place." "You can give me my own door," I said. One of the contractors stepped forward. It was supposed to be gentle pressure. It was clumsy. I reached into the tow truck bed and took the ratchet strap and the tow hook and swung the hook in an arc no faster than good judgment. It sang once against the contractor's wristwatch and knocked the watch into the gravel. Nobody got hurt. Everyone got alert. "Back up," I said. "I have nothing to lose and a lot of muscle memory." Caleb raised both hands. "We don't need this," he said. "Think of optics." "Optics is a flavor of lying," I said. "You should have learned truth." "People gave you sympathy. We sold the house with that story. I'm sorry. That's how the world works." The hook hung at my side. The world works exactly the way you let it. We rented the hall for another hour and told everyone there would be a private toast to honor people gone and people present. People like to be in the room where moral history gets written. Tommy took the mic first. He apologized without excuses, listed the dated stipends from the catering company connected to Lena's mother, and admitted to the silence he bought. He did not accuse. He said he failed. People cried honest tears this time. I nodded to Lena in the booth. She projected the spectrogram and rolled the 307 call with red markers on every splice. The hall got quiet the way a heart gets quiet before a blow. Lena finished with a clean sentence. "This is manufactured audio. It is not a miracle message. It is a trick." Rudy stared at the floor near the door. Lena held Caleb's hand so tightly the knuckles went pale. Maya lifted her chin like a person bracing for weather. "Now the rehearsal," Jessa said, and played the bouquet practice where Maya rehearsed the awe and the safety lines, and Pastor Rick timed his entrance. Pastor Rick took the stage before I asked and spoke into the microphone. "I acted like an actor," he said. "I forgot the first rule of care, which is that a person is not a prop. I am sorry." Sorry is a small word that only works when the ground beneath it is firm. I stepped up and did not raise my voice. I did not have to. The room leaned in. I described the staged giveaways on Maya's channel, where she borrowed items from a boutique, filmed, and returned them for a restocking fee disguised as a donation. I named the brand Lena, represented using stock photos for client transformations. I read Caleb's emails where networking dinners got comped by vendors who got 5-star reviews 2 days later. None of it was a crime. All of it was a mirror. The screens behind me lit with screenshots and dates. Rudy's group chat scrolled with the nicknames they used for family, Mole Dad and Museum Aunt. You could hear people decide who they were with in real time. Some backed away from the couple like the floor would cave in. Others crossed their arms and waited to see where the wind blew. The bouquet replayed again on a loop. Every time Lena held it out like a demand, the room flinched. "Keys," I said, and people looked at my hand like they expected to see silver. I set my apartment keys on a stool in the center of the stage. I took a small portable belt sander from my bag and squeezed the trigger. The motor sang. The belt spun. Sparks flew when I kissed the metal to the belt, little fireworks in a room with a low ceiling. I ground those keys flat until they were nothing but thin scraps and heat. Lena shouted, "He's dangerous," and pointed as if she had caught a criminal. The screens behind me lit at that moment with a scheduled post from a dummy account I had received in an anonymous DM earlier. It was Maya's draft exposé about me being senile and violent. The timestamp matched now. The audience watched the plan try to arrive and found the door locked. "No one touches my door," I said. I handed Pastor Rick an envelope. "Resignation template," I said. "You can fill in the reason yourself, or you can keep working and explain the rehearsal to your donors. Either way, you'll be doing ministry." He took the envelope with the care of a man touching a live wire. Lena grabbed Caleb's car keys and pulled him toward the exit. Maya followed like a rumor. I nodded to Jessa. We walked brisk, not fast, to the tow truck and rolled out onto the road. No sirens, no bravado. Just steady pressure. They hit the freeway cloverleaf with that panicked speed rich people get when they think embarrassment is a felony. I did not chase so much as arrive where they would have to stop. At the red light before the bridge, I eased the tow boom out and lowered the hook until it kissed the rear bumper of their car. I did not pull. I just sat there, idling, the hook touching like a fingertip on a shoulder. They could not go forward without losing a bumper. They could not back up because I was the river behind them. I stepped out. So did Jessa. I walked to the driver's side and knocked once on the glass. Lena looked straight ahead, as if forward was still available. Caleb stared at the dash. Maya held up her phone, but I shook my head, and she lowered it like a girl caught texting in church. "Out," I said. They got out. I handed Caleb a folder. "Quick claim forms for every gift you leveraged from me in the last 5 years," I said. "The wedding deposit I paid, the car down payment I co-signed, the furniture returns that showed up on my card. We are undoing all of it. Live. Right now. No lawyers. No police. You sign and we walk back in and watch the cancellations roll." Caleb took the pen like it was poisoned. He signed. He tried not to cry. He almost made it. Maya reached for his arm. I shook my head. "No touching the subject when the camera is on," I said. "Isn't that one of your rules?" Lena stared through me like this was not happening to her. "You can't cancel a life," she said. "You cancelled mine 15 years ago and tried to syndicate the reruns," I said. "This is a quiet season." The light turned green and stayed green and turned red again. We finished signing under the kind of sky that makes a river look like a long bruise. We met Tommy at the riverfront dock. He had an old voicemail he kept off his phone, backed up on a little recorder because he did not trust clouds. He pressed play and Evan's voice came out, bright and young and sorry. "Tell Dad I was coming home Saturday," he said. "Tell him I'm sorry about the brakes. I'll fix it." No ghost story. Just a kid talking about parts and time and the way both run out. I did not cry. I listened the way a mechanic listens to a rattle and knows which bolt sings. We went back to the hall together, the four of us, and the room felt like a courtroom where truth is a guest, not a judge. People watched us come in and looked for a way to see themselves as brave. That is what crowds do after the plot turns. On stage, I set down the receipts as if they were instruments I did not play anymore. I announced the cancellations, the returns, the quitclaims, the transfers to charity with confirmation numbers. I named the shelter that would get the deposit I paid for their venue. I showed the audience proof with printed emails because nobody trusts screens after a splice. Caleb's shoulders sagged. Maya's mouth trembled and then flattened. Lena held her face like it might fall off. I looked for my daughter's eyes and did not find them. I looked at my son and found the boy who used to ask for my ratchet set and forgot to bring it back. He looked down and finally said the sentence I had been owed. "Dad, I was wrong," he said. "I thought protecting our image was the same as protecting you. I was wrong." "Protection that takes something leaves a hole," I said. "You were patching the wrong wall." We ended at the loading dock behind the hall, where bands roll out drums and workers sneak a smoke. The air smelled like rain and electricity. People gathered in a half circle, the way they do when they feel a scene coming to a close and want the last line for themselves. I stood on the edge of the dock with Evan's unfinished ring on a chain in my hand. I had meant to resize it after he died and never did. I slid the chain over my head. The metal touched skin like a long handshake. I spoke low. There was a boy who bought brakes and did not install them. There was a truck driver who drank and then got sober and then told the truth. There was a family that learned to turn grief into brand equity. There was a father you tried to wrap in bubble wrap and carry like a prop. You do not get to keep me. You do not get to rename me. You do not get my door. Lena opened her mouth. I lifted a hand. She closed it. Jessa put the projector's last slide on the wall by the dock. It was not a screenshot. It was the old receipt for the brake calipers, date-stamped, store-stamped, grease-smudged. The room inhaled. The sound of truth is not loud. It is final. Tommy stepped forward and faced the crowd. "I can't give him his son back," he said. "I can give him the truth." Caleb touched his lips and nodded once like a man learning a word for the first time. Maya wiped her eyes with the edge of a program and looked away from every camera. I took my flattened keys out of my pocket and let the pieces fall to the dock. The little bits glittered like fish scales. The crowd watched them bounce and settle. I turned toward the door to the hall and looked at the people who had decided to stand between me and any hand that reached for my pocket again. They were not saints. They were neighbors. That is better. I opened the door to the corridor and stepped into the ordinary light. The ring on the chain lay against my collarbone like a promise I made to myself long ago and finally kept. Behind me, voices rose. Not cheers, just a kind of bright noise a town makes when it finally finds the right name for something. I did not look back. I did not bow. I did not explain. I walked through the doorway and shut it with my hand, solid and plain, the way a man ends a story when the work is done.